Now let's see these first two types of implementations of directories. One is single level and the other one is two level. So single level directory and the other one is two level directory. So what is single level directory is entire file system will contain only one directory, and this particular directory is supposed to mention all the files which are present in the file system. Now what is the advantage of this and what is the disadvantage of this? See, this is nothing but the directory and these are all the files, right? Now the directory is containing one entry for each file in the directory, right? So each entry is representing one file 1, file 2, like this. Now the problem with this method is the number of files themselves might be very large that they might not fit in, or even if you try to fit in one directory, this searching may be difficult. But the advantage is, okay, let's talk about the advantages first. What is the advantage of this organization? Implementation is very simple, isn't it? And also, in case if the number of files are very small, searching is very simple. Creating a file is very simple because you have only one directory, and also searching a file is very simple because there is only one place to search, and implementation is very simple. But what are the various disadvantages is, now when you have to put all the files in the same directory, then naming of the files might be difficult. Sometimes you might have to, or you might accidentally or intentionally want to name two files with the same name, right? So most often you might see the names like test.c. If you are writing a test program, you just write test.c, right? And now with this kind of, and you might want that name to be there for two files. Now if you have the same name for these two files, it will be very difficult to distinguish these two files, right? And this is one scenario. And the other scenario is, assume a setting where in your laboratory, in your lab, you have many people using the same system. Then many users will be using the same system, and all of them are supposed to use the same directory in this setting. You don't have different directory for different users, right? Now when you have those many people using the same directory, the problem will arise at various levels. One problem is, as I told you, the naming problem, and the other problem is, it is not just about the names. Other problem is accessing. You might want to, a user who has created this file might want it to be at a different security level. He doesn't want anyone else to access it, and since all the files are in the same directory, some other user, when he logs in, since there is no way we can distinguish him, he might try to use that or access that file. Therefore, having one directory, even though it is a one level directory, single level directory, even though it is easy to implement, it has got various disadvantages associated with it. So one disadvantage is we cannot separate the users, and the other disadvantage is naming is also an issue. And moreover, the earlier operating systems like MS-DOS, it allowed only 11 characters, and using only 11 characters, it will be very difficult for you to come up with unique names as the number of files increases, right? Therefore, and Unix has increased it. Unix, in Unix it is 255 characters. So Unix has somehow solved the problem, but still having multiple users use the same system under this condition is really not advisable, right? And the next solution is the two-level directory. In two-level directory, what happens is, you will have something called as master directory or master file directory, and this master file directory will contain information about all the users who will be using this system. Now let us say there are 4 people using this system: user 1, user 2, user 3, user 4. Now for each user there will be a different directory, that is in the second level, and the first level directory, the main file directory or the master file directory, will contain information about who that user is, For example, if you try to log in onto the system, now you will have a separate credentials like username and password. Now once you give your username and password and you log in onto the system will recognize you that you are some certain user type. Let us say the system has recognized that you are user number 1. Then system will automatically access or let you access only the directory which is dedicated for you, and it will be in the second level, right? And now this directory which is dedicated to user 1 will contain all the files which are created by user number 1, and so he can access all those files without using any special permissions like this. Are you getting this? Now user 1, so these are all the files created by user 1, and this is the directory which belongs to user 1. And now similarly there will be one more directory for user 2 like this, and there will be files which are created by user 2. They are all the files which are created by user 2. And now once any user logs in as user 1, then the operating system will remember that he is the user 1 by using some variable. In some of the operating systems, or I'm just taking it as an example, see, we are not going into the case studies like whether it is Unix or Linux or Windows. We are not going into that, but all the operating systems, they generally remember or have a variable in which it will store the username. For example, it will use something called as present working directory, that is a variable, and the this variable will contain what is the directory that this particular user can access, right? For example, if the user logs in as user 1, then the present working directory might contain the directory name of user 1. And now as long as this particular user is using the system, whenever he specifies any file, then that file will be searched from this particular directory and not from the other directory. This is how we can distinguish the users on the same system. Now what is the advantage of this? The advantage is simple. Now you can have different directories contain the same file name. In sense, here there can be a file which is called as test.c. At the same time, the other user can also have the file test.c without any confusion, because when this particular user logs in user 1, then when he tries to use the name test.c, operating system will start searching from his present working directory, which is nothing but this one, which starts at this point, and later in some other multi-level directories you can change the present working directory, right? So let's not use this present working directory, this might create some problem. There will be some variable using which our operating system will remember which directory you are legally allowed to access. Okay, now that is how you can have the same file name for different files, and also you can separate the files which are created by different users, and so even by accidentally also a user will not be able to access the files which are created by the other user. For example, this user will not be allowed to use the files created by this user. Is it an advantage or a disadvantage? In most of the cases it is an advantage, as long as the projects on which the users are working are different, but in some cases it might be a disadvantage in case if if two users wants to share a file, right? And how to share the file, this concept we shall see later. Okay, sometimes we might want to share the files, but the main problem here arises with the system files. There will be something called as system files, which are nothing but the executable files. For example, if you want to create a file, then you are supposed to run a file which will contain the code to create the file, isn't it? Or remove a file or something like that. These are called as system files. For example, compiler is a system file. So when these system files have to be accessed, there will be a problem. The problem is that the system files will not be present in all the user directories. Therefore, when you try to run a system file, when operating system will search in your directory, and if it doesn't find it in your directory, then it will say that you can't run that file. To solve this problem, there are two solutions. One solution is copy all the system files in all the user directories or in all the users space. But the problem with that is, if you go on copying the same system files in all the directories, it is going to take a lot of space, isn't it? It's just a waste of space. That is why some operating systems have used a different method. The different method is, there will be one more special directory, user level directory created, which will contain only the system files. This is a special directory which does not belong to any user, but all the users can use it, and it is called as system. It contains all the system level files or system files. Now all the system files will be present here. Whenever a user tries to give a command which requires that system file, then initially his own directory, let us say user 1 is trying to give a command, then his own directory will be searched to find the find the file. If the file with that name is not present in his directory, then the operating system will go to this particular directory which contains all the system files and then search it. Right? Using that, we can solve the problem of sharing the system level files. But then sharing the user level files, it requires some more detail. We shall see that later. So anyway, the main difference between single level directory and two level directory is, in single level directory we cannot have multiple users, but here we can have multiple users. Here it is simple to implement, but here it is somewhat difficult to implement, right? And most of the systems, they are using multi-level directories. We shall see about it. So next we shall again classify using graph and tree and all these things. Okay.